Good evening. My name is Kathleen Smith, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer of ClearedJobs.Net, a veteran job board and job fair company. And we are talking tonight about one of my favorite topics. How do we help transitioning military personnel better prepare for the civilian world? And what are some of the resources that they can use to be able to better support their transition? I am joined by two colleagues, one from AFCEA Northern Virginia and the other from AFCEA Quantico. AFCEA is the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association, a program and community that I have been involved with for over 20 years and proudly serve as a volunteer for many of the chapters. I'm going to ask each one of my panelists to tell us their name, their background, their MOS, their current position, and their AFCEA position, their AFCEA association. So, Scott, do you want to kick it off for us?
You bet. Thanks for having me and inviting me to be able to share my transition story with so many other military veterans that are about to start their own journey. So, my name's Scott Stebbins. My background: I'm a United States Marine. I just retired after 30 years of service on 1 July. My military occupational specialty was 0602 communications officer, and I currently work for Microsoft Federal as a digital advisor and architect supporting the Department of Defense. And as far as AFCEA, I've been in AFCEA since 1990, and I was the vice president of the Quantico Potomac chapter back in 2010 to 2012 when I was down at Quantico during that tour as the commanding officer of communications school. And then right now I'm just a regular member of that same chapter of the Quantico Potomac chapter. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. And Ron, you and I have worked together for many years. So tell us a little bit about your background, MOS, current position, and the various different roles you've held with AFCEA.
Sure. Thanks, Kathleen, and good evening. And thanks for hosting this event. I do want to shamelessly advertise Cleared Jobs as a great resource for those who are transitioning. Many years ago, I actually used it myself. I'm Ron Zich. Like Scott, I'm a retired Marine communications officer. I retired back in 2011. And since then, I've held a number of positions working for a major defense contractor, for the government as a GS, for AT&T, and now for a company called Title Athene as a director for multiple DoD organizations. You could say I can't hold a job, but probably more accurately is that over the last 10 years, I've actually had the opportunity to do what I wanted. Today, I'm affiliated with the AFCEA Northern Virginia, or NOVA chapter, and have been with the chapter since about 2007. And then lastly, as a communications officer, AFCEA is my professional organization. And I encourage each of you to join your respective professional organization. And we'll touch more on that, on why that's important in our discussion. Thanks, Kathleen.
Wonderful. So, Scott, what I think is always interesting is that people in general think that the transition is something that is very standard. So I'm just wondering what we can talk about and what you can share briefly about your transition story. What are some of the things you did not know that you wish you had known ahead of time? And what were one or two things you wish you had done differently?
Sure. So first, I just want to say up front, no matter how long you've been in the military, whether it's 4 years or 30 years, transitioning or retiring out of the military is stressful, and looking for a job is a full-time job. So with that said, my transition story is very unique, and hopefully I'll be able to share that, and you might take advantage of it as well. And so I retired after 30 years of service as a Marine Corps communications officer, as a colonel, and everyone told me, "Hey, you'll have no problem looking for a job. This will be easy." That was true, but it was also not true. Like I said earlier, looking for a job is a full-time job. So my story begins with taking advantage of one of the DoD Skill Bridge transitioning programs, Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program. I learned about that program when I was going through my transition readiness seminar 2 years out, and then a year out, like one of my mentors told me to do. And then I applied for that Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program, and was accepted for a Microsoft fellowship. And so during that 12 weeks, that allowed me to 30 years of being a Marine, and that's all I knew, and that's all I did. During that 12 weeks, that allowed me to learn about industry, to learn about Microsoft and what it has to offer. But it's much more than that, because you're part of a cohort that you will get a chance to learn about other industries that participate in the program, whether it's AWS or AT&T or Verizon or there's countless of companies that support this program. And at the end of the 12 weeks, it's an opportunity. If you like the company and they like you, it's an opportunity to transition into that company, or maybe one of those other companies that you were part of that cohort for, that you learned about during that 12-week fellowship, to be able to transition. So that helped me personally. After 30 years of doing something, that 12-week program was a blessing in disguise. What are some of the things that I didn't know that I wish I had known? You're not alone, right? My recommendation to everybody is make sure you have a mentor or a couple mentors, that someone that has been there, done that can help guide you through your transition to learn all the lessons that they did, to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. And that's why we're here today. And one of those things is your family, if you're married and you have kids, especially if you've been in for a long time, is they're transitioning too. And you can't forget that. So that's one of the things that I didn't know then, that I wished I had known, that I would include my family a little bit more than I did, because they're transitioning as well. What are a couple of things that I wish I've done differently? I wouldn't say differently per se. I think I was well prepared. My mentors, prepared me along the way. I think there's some lessons learned that I could have done better. One of them being time. You run out of time quicker than you think. So, don't wait till the last minute. Create a checklist and, create a schedule and manage your time wisely, and begin planning. When you make that decision, start out with making goals and objectives and stick to that checklist. And then the second thing I would say is stay organized. I think I would have probably done a better job, writing things down, keeping a log after every person you've talked to on the phone or over the internet, write things down and keep a good log of everything you've done. And then I think the last thing is be humble. After 30 years as a Marine Corps officer, you're starting over, and that's okay. Everyone fills sandbags, and I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves, and neither should you be. Be humble and remember to smile through this process. It's stressful, but everyone before you has done it, and you're going to get through it just like I did.
Sounds great. Thank you, Scott. So, Ron, you may have transitioned a little bit sooner than a little bit more farther along than Scott did. Can you share a little bit about your story and what were some of the challenges that you experienced during your story? What did you did not know then that you wish you had known?
Thanks. And Scott hit on a number of them already. And really the first is, how do you leverage your mentors? Everybody has mentors, whether you know it or not. Your old bosses, your peers, even the people that you've met with that are in industry today can be your mentors. And while I used a few in my first couple job searches to understand the marketplace, to understand compensation and how to interview and negotiations, I relied on two or three, quite frankly. I should have reached out to many more. I think it just would have made the experience more enriching, and I would have learned more, because each comes in with a little different perspective. Probably the second thing I've learned over the last 10 years really is, and I mentioned how many positions I've held, is how much flexibility that I had. Twice I decided just on my own I wanted to change the scenery. I was just tired of working at a place. In the military, every 3 years or 2 years, 4 years, you get a set of orders. So you get that natural change of scenery. If you're in industry or government as a civilian, you don't get that. I wish I had known kind of how many positions were open, and that I really didn't need to have all this, what I'll call self-induced stress that I added to myself and my family mulling over these decisions. as Scott said, between your background, your experience, the possibilities are really endless. And the decision that I've had recently is not should I move, because I made those decisions, but it's where do I want to move? Do I want to move to a big company, a small company, a privately owned company, a publicly traded company? Each has their pros and cons. So as you look at all your different opportunities, Scott said keep a logbook. Well, keep a log of what your goals and objectives are. And then lastly, on the personal side, Scott touched on it a little bit. I wish I had learned early on in my first transition that nights and weekends and holidays, well, they're just that, quite frankly. I took 4 months off after I retired, between terminal leave and burning up leave. But I still came in with that military mindset, get the job done, go, go, go. You really have to learn how to prioritize, learn not to be tied to your phone or computer all the time. Learn that very rarely will your boss actually call you on the weekend and ask you to do something. So take advantage of that. Scott's absolutely right. Your family is transitioning as well. So take advantage of that. And then I guess lastly, in many ways, being in the military has prepared us to lead as a civilian. If you've only worked with military personnel over the years and over your career, it's a lot different working with non-military people when they work for you, when they work with you. The same general principles apply. Honesty, integrity, commitment, and there's a lot of HR types of rules to follow. I often tell myself, HR is my friend because they can guide you through many of the things. In the military, there's sort of the mindset of how to get work done. That doesn't always translate very well to the corporate or even to the civilian government side. So those are some things that I wish I had known early on.
Well, Ron, I'm going to sort of still keep you on the spotlight here because your career trajectory has been slightly different than what I've seen many other people do. So do you want to sort of give a brief overview of your career trajectory and why you made certain decisions? Because you went from, civilian back to government, back to civilian. And I don't think many folks who are transitioning understand that they're going to be leaving their job. They're going to be leaving the military, taking a job. And then that next job that they have is not going to be for the next 20 or 30 years, that they're going to constantly be thinking about the next 2 or 3 jobs that they're going to have. So you want to give us a little bit more of an overview of your career trajectory and some of the things that you want to share?
Yeah, thanks. So when I left the military, for a lot of personal reasons, I didn't want to go back into the government. That was just a decision I made. I wanted to try the industry side. Being an AFCEA for a number of years, I had a lot of interaction with folks who are in the industry. It sounded exciting. It sounded different. So pretty early on, I made the decision I'm going to go to industry. To be quite frank, I looked at the financial side of it, and the financial side for me personally was an important component to my decision. And so I went to the industry side. After about 2.5 years, I just kind of got bored. I was doing a lot of business development. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to get more involved in program management type of work. An opportunity opened up in the government, so I applied for that and got accepted for that. For those of you who currently serve or have served in the Pentagon, after about another 2.5 years, I got tired of A, the commute, and B, having an office with no windows. So I decided to make another move. Found a job a little further mileage wise, but it was something I was interested in doing. I went to work for AT&T as a strategist, got to learn about new technologies and the direction AT&T was going. And that was pretty exciting. After about 2 years, actually, the individual who I worked with, who was responsible for the Marine Corps' profit and loss, decided to retire. And so I was asked to take that position. So another new challenge for me, right? So I didn't have to change companies, but I had a new challenge. So that was really exciting for me. So the point is, if you want to move, you can move. And I think we'll get into a little bit here about why networking is so important when you want to make these types of moves. Just one last comment. Scott mentioned be organized when you're looking for your job. Now, remember, pre-virtual time, I went to AFCEA events and I probably had, 500 business cards. And that was actually my starting point for when I wanted to, or for when I was retiring, is I took all those cards and laid them out on the dining room table and just went through them and made up my own process as to whether I was interested in that company or not. So Scott's absolutely right. Have some level of organization as you start this, because getting a job is a job.
Yes, I think that is something that we hear very frequently. Finding a job is a full-time job. So Scott, I'm hoping you can share a little bit more with us as to how, not right one. How was your military experience helpful in your career? Because not only is it the subject matter that you're working on, or maybe your technical experience, but what are some of the other aspects of your military career that have been helpful in your civilian career?
Sure. So I think veterans or military members that are transitioning right now, the first thing I'd like to say to you is, you know more than you think, and you have more to offer than you might think as well. What I mean by that is the military trains and educates you well, whether you just do 4 years or 30 years. And what I mean by that is you'll develop relationships with your bosses, your peers, your subordinates, and those relationships will benefit you in the future as you transition. The military also prepares you to be flexible, right? You got to go at moment's notice. Your schedule always changes. And so that resiliency that the military members get when they're in the military will transition well to the civilian workforce. And one thing with me in particular is I'm a planner, right? So I like to plan. The military taught me how to plan. I think that benefited me well with planning my transition. And I like to just, talk about 3 things that can help you plan your transition that should be important to you. And these 3 things you need to keep in the forefront of your thoughts as you go about your journey with transitioning. And that's the first thing is culture, right? The 3 C's. And the first C is culture. And, you need to pick a company, big or small, that the culture is, similar to probably what the military culture is, right? The ethics and values and the morals, whether it's a big company or small company, you got to like the culture, whether the organization, your boss, the peers, and that's really important is the culture. The second thing I'll talk about, the second C, is compensation. Money, but it's not all about the base pay. There's other benefits, there's bonuses, there's stocks, there's 401k, there's medical, there's other factors that weigh into compensation. Don't get focused just on base pay. There's so much more out there. And then the third C that I'll say is commute, right? But COVID-19 kind of changed it all. But prior to COVID-19, just like Ron, I drove up to the Pentagon for 2 years, and because I had to, right? I had to accept orders. But as you transition, you get to pick your job. And so the third C is also important too, is commute. Do you want to spend your time in traffic, an hour plus every day to and from to where you want to get to, and then travel as well? Do you want to travel or do you want to stay home? So you get to pick. So my recommendation is don't compromise on these 3 C's. Pick 2 of the 3, prioritize them, and make sure that at least 2 out of the 3, your number 1 and number 2 choice. You draw a red line. You have more to offer than you think, and you can choose where you want to go. Don't compromise. So I think those 3 C's of culture, compensation, and commute, as you plan your journey and leverage those relationships and the flexibility and the resiliency you get as a military member will help you with your transition. I think the last thing I'll say is, as a planner, is use LinkedIn. This platform that we're on right now, LinkedIn is a great platform to transition to use for training and education. There's great training and education resources you can take advantage of. There's great networking capabilities within LinkedIn. Let it do its job for you, save you time. There's great job search capabilities. And another thing is, take a look at my LinkedIn profile, connect, reach out to me. My resume's on there. Look at my LinkedIn profile. It's not perfect, but I worked on it over that 2-year transition as I started my transition, 2 years out. And go beyond your circle of friends or your circle of trust, because there's more people that don't look like you, right, with short hair and are in the military. You need to expand your circle of trust, your circle of friends, kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable and reaching out to other people that you may or may not have reached out to in your military career. As you transition out, there's a bit of a risk that you have to take to be able to network with people kind of outside your comfort zone. That's a necessary evil that you just got to get used to. So that's my big pitch on, those are the things, my military experience helped me with in my career that I think can also help you with your transition as you either get out of the military after 4 years or retire after 20 to 30 years.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And Ron, can you share with us sort of how was your military experience helpful in the career you have now? I mean, you've done some various different moving between different management and admin jobs, but what were other aspects of your military experience that have helped you in your career?
Yeah, so obviously the military career helped me build my network. The reality is many of us end up supporting DOD, or more specifically, our branch of service that we came from. So, just between the industry engagements that you have in your office, AFCEA events, NDIA events, whatever kind of events that you go to, you've probably met more people than you actually realize. If you don't actually engage with industry, how are they going to know who you are and when you're transitioning? So I tried to get out there pretty publicly, and when I was ready to transition, let folks know. The second thing, I think, my military experience. I mentioned earlier, military members PCS pretty regularly, and it seems the more senior you become, the more years you have in. I think I went one time, 3 summers in a row moved. And that kind of got me in the mindset of keeping doors open, be ready for change, be ready for moves. Many people think, well, I want to have a government job. That'll give me security, right? Will you become bored with that job? I personally did. Does it meet your financial objectives? That's a question only you can answer. If you want to go to industry, what role are you looking for? What type of career progression do you think you'll have? Many will tell you it's very difficult to move up internally within a company. So to move up, you may have to move out. So my point is, think about casting your net widely, just as you've done in your military careers. Many of you have done a tour in recruiting. You went out there, you knew nothing about recruiting. You had a successful 36 1-month tours, or you did some other type of acquisition job or policy job that you may not have felt well suited for, but you were successful. So cast your net widely, use all the information that you can find, and then make your informed decisions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ron. So we've touched on networking a little bit and, in bits and pieces, and we all know that networking is really important. But I think one thing we don't really hear about networking a lot within the military. It's really more, based on your branch, based on your position. So if you can both share with our audience 1 or 2 things that is different between networking in the military community versus the civilian. So Scott, you want to kick that off for us?
Well, I think one thing that I learned looking back on things, and one thing that I kept getting told is in the military, it's all about us and we, the team, is what we did as a team, how I contributed to the success of the mission. Whereas in the civilian world, it's all about me and I. And that was hard for me to think about it as I was transitioning from 30 years as a Marine to a civilian. But then I had to explain that, on resumes or on my LinkedIn page, and then, during interviews. And so when you're in the military, you can't do it alone, right? It's a team sport. But what companies are looking for is they want to know what you did as an individual, not what your team did. And so it's a different mindset. And so I had to get used to that. That was hard for me because we're very humble people being in the military. We do our mission, we don't complain, and we go home to our families at the end of the night. But now you got to tell your story. And that's what's different. In the civilian world, they want to hear your story, and they want to hear what you did. And not only do they want to hear what you did, they want you to take credit for it. And they want to see data-driven results. They want to know, the quantifiable, what did you do? How well did you do it? And what impact did you have? As far as, did you increase something by a certain percentage, or the number of people you led, and basically what that did, right? What was the end result? What value did you add? And so I had to learn to shift my vocabulary. So in the military, right, we're used to speaking a certain way with our own acronyms and process and tools and culture and everything. So you're going to have to change all that. You're going to have to learn to be able to translate. In the Marines, we call a bathroom a head, right? You're going to have to be able to translate a head to a restroom. That's just a simple, so but if you can make that change in your head, you can easily adapt, right? You can make that transition from the military to the civilian by learning that company's processes, that company's tools, that their acronyms, their culture. It's easier than you think to do, but you had to be able to, I guess, to sum it all up, they want to hear from you. What did you do? And you have to take credit for what you did when you led your team of Marines, to accomplish a mission. So don't be shy about that. Be proud of that, and tell your story.
Sounds great. Thank you, Scott. So, Ron, how did you find the networking in the civilian world differ from the military world? So what are some of the pointers folks should be thinking about? Scott was talking about translating certain terms. What are some of the things that you found that you had to change in the way you networked?
Sure. So Scott made a lot of great points about networking in order to find your first post-retirement position. And obviously that's a key component of networking when you're getting ready to retire. Of course, it's also important if you're getting ready to move, right? If you want to go do something different. Let me take a little different perspective for when you get out on the industry side. Networking is still important. On the industry side, it's like being in the joint environment, right? No, the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Marine Corps or the Coast Guard does not generally go do a mission by themselves. They have other support organizations or other services. Companies are like that when they try to win an opportunity, right? They put a team together. So part of your job in the civilian side is to build a team that can win an opportunity or a contract. When you go networking, you're talking to companies about, what do you specialize in? What's your niche skill or your niche technology? Do you know this customer? How can you help our team win? And if you're in a government position as a GS, as a civilian, networking is important as well. It allows you to connect with companies that can support you. To be frank, sometimes it's a pain to meet with companies or with industry. Many say, "Oh, they just want to sell you something." I think Scott and I could both attest that. Well, this is partially true. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Many of us former military, we want to give back. We still have a connection to our service, and we want the best for our service members. So, so whether you're on the industry side or on the government side, network remains an important component. And then lastly, Scott mentioned your vernacular. One thing I wish I had learned much earlier was sort of on the business development side, I'll call it, and the internal company side. Let me tell you a dirty little secret. It doesn't matter what your business card says. We're all business developers, right? We're all invested in growing our companies, AKA business development. A few hours spent online learning about things like win strategies and value propositions, hot buttons, PTW, price to win, margin, wrap rates. That's time well invested, a couple hours. So when you go in and do interview, you can have some level of familiarity with these type of terms that you'll use every day.
That's some really great information, because I know that there's a lot of things that, you move from one lingo to another lingo, and it can be disconcerting. So let's wrap this up with, how did AFCEA help you in your transition? Ron, I'm going to go back to you. What were some of the things how did you find out about AFCEA, and how did they help you during your transition?
So the position I was in was actually at the headquarters Marine Corps, C4, Command Control Communications Computers Department, and I had been familiar with AFCEA from when I was lieutenant on, so I knew what it was, and I was told, you're the Marine Corps representative. So that's how I actually got back into it. Previously, I had been to multiple events at the various places I was stationed. So how did AFCEA help me? I've talked a lot about the networking component. Let me take a second and talk about virtual networking. It's a lot harder. If you're one of those, the Myers-Briggs ISTJs, and you join a session anonymously, you listen only, you don't ask any questions, you're probably getting some education, but you aren't really networking. When you sign in to an event like this, or some other conference or forum where industry is going to be there, use your rank, put your organization, ask questions. I can guarantee you one thing. I take screenshots of, when I'm on these conferences, of everybody that's on the conference. I want to know who from the government's on, who from the military's on. I want to know who my competitors are and who's on. Every day we're looking for our next generation workforce. So, you have to get out there. If you're one of those ISTJs, it's a little tougher. And then let me conclude by circling back to one of my introductory comments. Being a member of AFCEA, or whatever your professional association is, it's one thing to be a member, right? You write the check every year. They send you a magazine or an online subscription. It's another to actively support and participate. This is your way of giving back to your service, to the service members and to your community. So I encourage everyone not just to be a member, but to actively participate. And I think you'll see a lot of intangibles that come back to you. Really, you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah, that's great. I've really enjoyed over the last 20 years being involved with various different AFCEA chapters. How about you, Scott? You were down in Quantico, part of that chapter. How has AFCEA supported you in your transitioning and networking?
Well, first off, by doing events like this, right, which I'm giving back, where other folks like yourself and Ron and I have been friends for a while, and he helped with my transition, whether he knows it or not, by just talking to me and helping me, mentoring me, answering questions, providing his lessons learned, just being there to someone to listen to. I never thought. Eventually everyone's career comes to an end, right? Whether you are just doing 4 years and then get out, or you do 20 to 30 years. But I was an AFCEA member for 30 years as active duty military. So looking at it from that perspective, I would go to these events, with my fellow military members, but then I would meet other folks that were like me, right? They were prior military. Now they work for company X or industry Y. And you start making those connections, but and then you maintain those relationships over the years as you go to these different luncheons or events, and even though Quantico Potomac's a small organization, my heart's always with them. No offense, Ron, with AFCEA Nova, but it's a small community, right? And it's the friendships that come out of that you stay connected with them over the years, and then the Marine Corps sends you somewhere else, and then eventually you make your way back to Quantico. I really try to stay connected with the Quantico Potomac chapter and stay in connection with my friends, and if they couldn't help you, they would know someone who could help you, and that's the great thing about AFCEA and networking. But I guess I'll just finish up with this: is I'm going to give a plug, like I talked about earlier. Is my transition story. I was able to take advantage of one of the DoD skill bridge programs. I think everyone should be able to do that if you have the opportunity, whether it's Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program, like I went through and was a Microsoft Fellow, or another one. Microsoft also has their own DoD skill bridge program called the Microsoft Software Systems Academy, or MSSA program. That is a great one for transitioning veterans, especially ones that are getting out maybe after 4 years, young enlisted, young company grade officers that want hands-on, right? More hard skills. That's 18 weeks of hands-on keyboard, of programming, of coding, which gets you ready for that, for that virtual world of everything, software defined everything, or as a service everything. That's another great DoD skill bridge program that Microsoft offers, and now it's virtually, right? So, and I am proud to say I'm a mentor of the MSSA program. I'm giving back to my fellow veterans that go through that, as well as giving back through the Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program. It's always great to be able to help others like you were helped when I was transitioning. And it's opportunities like this that I'm able to give back. So I appreciate the opportunity speaking here tonight.
Wonderful. So we have a few minutes that I'm going to pull in one or two of the questions that we had from the audience. We also have quite a few people who are sending their thanks to both of you for sharing your stories. So I'm going to get down into the weeds a little bit and talk about that dreaded piece of paper or document called the resume. Because when we've done surveys of job seekers, more than 40% of them say the most difficult part of job search for them is actually crafting the resume. Now, I know that in the military, we have a specific layout and a specific way we write our resume. How did each one of you go through the process of converting your military resume into a civilian resume? Who wants to start first?
Start first.
Okay.
So I wrote it, and then I put it in a drawer for about a week, and then I read it, and I said, wow, this sounds like I'm applying to be a Marine. Probably not what I really want to do. So I just started kind of reading every word, and was I using acronyms and all those sorts of things. I got it to the point where I was pretty comfortable with it. And then I gave it to a couple of my mentors, which was probably the biggest mistake. I should have handed them a hard copy and then took it back after they read it, because it went wild. They started sending it out to everybody they knew, and I lost control of my process. But it was, I will tell you that 3 of the jobs I've had were all attained from my network. And at some point before I was actually hired, I had to give them my resume. But the resume wasn't the key to finding the job. It was the network.
Awesome. So we have puppies. Scott, what did you do to convert your military resume into a civilian resume?
Well, it's a challenge to take 30 years of doing something and try to condense it down into 2 pages. But it can be done. And, when I was going through my transition readiness seminar, this is the book that Department of Labor, that the employment workshop, it's pretty basic. It breaks down, different types of resumes. I recommend, that. But really, well, I agree with what Ron said. The resumes today are going by the way of the dodo bird, right? So I think recruiters these days are using LinkedIn. So great, you got your resume, 2 pages. Like Ron, I put it out there for CHOP, but ask for other people's resumes that have gone before you that you respect. There's no original thought. There's no shame in asking for other people's resumes. Obviously, it worked for them. They got a job. So ask for a copy of their resume. Take their good ideas. Guarantee they probably took it from someone else. And so you got to go through the resume process. That's important, but that's not the end state. My recommendation, have several resumes ready and tailor them to every job that you apply for. But really put a lot of effort into LinkedIn, right? So your resume needs to be on LinkedIn. It needs to match your LinkedIn profile, but LinkedIn allows you to expand your resume so much more. And you're able to pull during the application process. You're able to pull some companies, you're able to pull your LinkedIn profile into your application process to be able to tell your story. So if you can expand on your resume in your LinkedIn profile, I recommend you do that. So take a look at my LinkedIn profile. It's got my resume on there. It's got a pretty good LinkedIn profile, but I think, like Ron said, is the purpose is just to get an interview. And really, I don't know how much longer the resume is going to be around. I think things like LinkedIn are going to pretty much take over for how recruiters find you for interviews.
Great advice. I will counter that. I don't think the resume is going away. They've been calling for the death of the resume for over 30 years, and it's still around. It's the ad. It gets the phone call. It's not what gets you the job. So yes, you need to put some time into it. But yes, also really great advice to have your LinkedIn profile that has all the information. In the last few minutes, I want to touch on interviews, because in the military, you basically know what to expect from an interview. You've done the interviews before, you know how to do them, you know what kind of questions you're going to be asked, you know what kind of people are going to be on the other side of the table or on the other side of the screen. What are some things that helped you transition into doing civilian interviews? So Scott, I'm going to pick on you first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the interview, that's what you want, right? Whether it's through the resume or through your LinkedIn profile, that's scary, right? How you dress, how you act, and what you say. For me, I like to talk, so it's better to just remember, answer the question, take your time. I think to prepare for an interview, I think one of the things I did was, like, for example, Amazon Web Services has a pretty competitive interview process. So I've heard, right? And the different leadership traits and principles that they have. And so I heard if you can make it through an AWS interview, you can make it through any interview. So I Googled that, and basically you just tell your story. So basically you kind of relate to the different various leadership principles and traits, which are very similar to the to the military and to tell you the truth, other companies' leadership principles and traits too. But if you can link your experiences and be able to tell a story and link it to that leadership attribute or principle in like 2 to 3 minutes and get your point across, I think less is more. You'll have a successful interview.
Sounds great. So Ron, when you've gone through the various different interviews, what are some of the things that you have noticed different between your military interviews and what you were doing in your civilian interviews?
So one, for the civilian interviews, as the saying goes, I didn't wear my Corps frames or my Marine Corps tie clip, as Scott mentioned. But I've actually seen that as a hiring manager now. So I'm going to flip it around a little bit and tell you what I'm looking for. If I'm interviewing you, that means you're already qualified, right? You don't really have to convince me that you're qualified. I've seen your resume. If you're a lieutenant colonel and you have certain, CISSP or whatever, sort of professional acronyms on your resume, I can see where you've been. I can see what you've done. I know what your skill sets are, right? What I'm really looking for is, are you going to be a good fit for the team? Because, it is a team sport. For the most part, nothing gets done alone. So I'm looking, are you going to fit into the team? Are you going to fit into our culture, the way we do business? You should be flipping that around, right? You should be asking me, what's it like working here? What is the culture here? What are the expectations? But again, if I'm interviewing you, you've already made the cut. If you weren't qualified, I wouldn't want to talk to you, right? So it's more, how are you going to fit in with the rest of the team?
Sounds great. Well, Ron, Scott, we've had a great day, great evening here. I'm just going to let everyone know that if you didn't get your question answered, please send your question to customer service at ClearedJobs.Net, and we'll be sure to get you your answer. ClearedJobs.Net also does have a job fair coming up this Thursday, an all clearances virtual job fair. So please feel free to register for that. I want to thank both Ron and Scott for their time this afternoon. Thank you both for your service. And Ron, thank you so much for reaching out to me a few months ago to do this. I really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks. Good luck, everybody.
Good night.